Okay. All right, Shawn, let's go to another theme of Jefferson basketball. What are your memories of, like, practice? I mean, it would always seem like Jack and Jake had us prepared. I mean, if there's one thing that, you know, there's obviously a handful of things that lead to success, but the being organized and being prepared to play.
Yeah, well, they were pretty consistent with what we practice. I mean, and obviously, and I don't know if anybody's brought it up, but the big motto was offense wins games, defense wins championships. I mean, and worked a lot on defense, and that's one thing, you know, I don't know. You just don't see, you still see good defense, but I think Jefferson was a pretty good defensive structured team, you know. I mean, we obviously, you know, worked a lot on moving our feet and shuffling and all that. You know, obviously everybody works on their free throws, but you know, and doing the fast break outlets and all that. You know, of course it was so long ago, but I just remember that it was pretty consistent practices, and then, you know, you had your Saturday morning practice as well, and, you know, and also one thing I do remember is, we're talking about back to the gym time and stuff too, didn't we have to, like, sometimes practice at like 4 because the girls get a practice or something like that? Wasn't that how that worked?
I don't remember that so much. We always, being the varsity team, they'd get one half of the gym.
Yeah, I thought
we had the
that
divider.
once in a while that we would have to wait to practice, but I could be wrong. But yeah, there was hardly any gym space. But I do remember, you know, your dad obviously working with me quite a bit, which helped my game tremendously.
Exactly. All right, let's talk about, I want to tell you something that's interesting. From 1975 to 1987, okay, so 12 years, a span of 12 years, Jefferson made the state tournament, coming out of the toughest conference in the state, the toughest section in the state, getting to the state tournament that many times is pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Because there's other good teams around this area of the metro. 7 state tournament appearances, so that's over half the time you're getting there. 4 state championships during that period. So there was kind of an aura around Jefferson basketball at that time. I know you've talked about this. What do you think about that? About the aura of how other people viewed the program back in those days?
Well, I think a lot of kids probably, and back in that day too, probably some families moved here to go play basketball, you know. I mean, it was kind of like the Duke there for a while of, you know, they were going to get in and contend for a championship, if not win a championship, and, you know.
Ray Branch.
Yeah, I mean, when, you know, you get this, yeah, there's definitely, and then guys would come in and then they decided that maybe they weren't going to get any playing time and would leave. I'm not going to name any names, but I can name a few people. I can think of a few people, but yeah, I mean, there's no question about it. Not only as a player did you think you're going to do well, but I think that it was a, you know, and back in the Star Trib, they used to wait and come out with they had the AP rankings, you know, it was before the internet, and you knew Jefferson's was going to be in the top 5 or top 10 every, you know, if not number 1. And,
right.
You know, now there's so many different rankings, but I've talked, you know, I mean, it's, and one thing about Jack and Jake is, I mean, they ran a tight program. There was no recruiting. Those guys didn't go out, and, you know, and we were starting to see some of that when we were getting to be juniors and seniors, where guys were like, God, how'd they end up at that school, you know? And,
right.
And I don't think they would, so that, but mostly it was brought up through the feeder program, don't you think? I mean, you know, I mean, I could name a few people that came in, but mostly all the good players that were coming through Jefferson had grown up through the ranks. There was a person once in a while that had come over here, but you had to play into, speaking of Ray Branch, and Ray Branch was a heck of a basketball player and a good guy, but, you know, I mean, you got to play within the system at Jefferson. Because Ray kind of tried to play outside the system once in a while.
My brother Tim always talks about that year, '83. You guys come from Lincoln. You got the current Jefferson guys, and they were pretty good already.
Yeah.
Then you got Ray coming in, and Ray kind of had to, so you got a system at Lincoln that you had to change to the Jefferson, learn how it worked here. And Ray was kind of an individual talent.
Yeah.
He was a good player, obviously, but he had to kind of learn that way too.
Yeah, I mean, I know that Ray definitely had some frustrations, but I mean, by the end of the year, he had got it, because he was a one-on-one basketball player, and he wasn't, you know. I mean,
That's what Tim always said.
Yeah.
He said that by the end of that season, that Ray started to really
Yeah,
play
he
within the
did.
team.
You know, and Ray helped out the team tremendously. But, and I'm trying to think, Ray was at Kennedy for a while, right? And
Well, he came from Kennedy, yeah.
And, but yeah, I mean, you knew that Jefferson was going to be good, and that's why Jefferson got good crowds back then. You know, I mean, I've been to some games in the last few years where I've been pretty disappointed, but kids aren't they're not going to hockey games either.
Right. And you just talked about it. We got enough here, guys, with commitment to community, would you say?
Yeah.
Is that, okay, so we can kind of skip that, just kind of winning or losing with Jefferson kids. The last kind of theme, Shawn, let's just talk about kind of the togetherness and teamwork. I mean, that's a staple. That's the core of the success that we had back in our day, is teamwork.
Well, I mean, when you look back, yeah, when I look back, and I mean, I still talk to a lot of my old teammates, and we're talking over 30 years ago, and I know that, you know, I mean, of course, you guys, we were together a lot, not like these teams are now, where, you know, you're traveling and staying in hotels, but, you know, we'd do the Duluth trip, or, you know, make it to state and stay down there, and that was at the old Civic Center, and I don't know, is that where you played too, at the Civic Center?
Yeah.
But I do, you know, there was a lot of togetherness and, you know, a lot of bonding. And of course, we'd all get together in the summer and play hoops at, you know, and I'd get together with a bunch of the guys from Kennedy too. I mean, Steve Russian and Mike McCullough, and we'd get together and play over at the Normandale or the Institute. And I think you might play with us once in a while.
The Institute.
Yeah.
Oh my God! I'll tell you guys. I'll tell you that later. But that's hilarious. That's Mike McCullough right there.
Well,
and Russian too.
Yeah, and you guys know who Russian is, don't you?
Steve Russian.
And I mean, we would make up these stupid basketball terms, and that's how Russian ended up getting in with Sports Illustrated. Because what was that playground book called? You know what I'm talking
Is
about?
that McCullough and Russian that did it?
No, but it was an old sports reporter from the Sports Illustrated. I'm trying to say it was like In Your Face or something, but you know, we'd make up these terms, and you know, but we didn't have. That was the summertime where you get together and play basketball. But yeah, I mean, back to your, you know, I still talk to, you know, a lot of my teammates, not as much. But, you know, and looking back at your group, I mean, you guys were all a real tight-knit group of kids. And
we played together on the floor. That's what I'm saying. That also shows it, is when we played games in '85, we played together. I was just talking to Zach the other day, and just like you and him had great chemistry between each other. You'd do a lot of high-low dump-down passes. You'd be in the post. Daryl would be at the free throw line, catch the ball and pass it down to you. And sometimes you'd do the opposite. You'd be at the, you know, so there was good chemistry.
I mean, and that's one thing with basketball now, you know, I mean, they don't even work it down the post. I mean, it's completely changed the game. And, you know, Jefferson was, to my knowledge, I thought they like to work it down the post, at least our era. Well, and, you know, I don't know about, it depends on what kind of big man you have too, I suppose. But, yeah, you know, and obviously a lot of good athletes at Jefferson. I mean, we were a very athletic team, and you know, a lot of guys went on and did stuff in college, not necessarily in basketball. But
okay, let's move on to, let's start getting into like just your senior year in '85 and that team. I'm going to give you one of your teammates' names, and you tell me in a couple sentences what type of player they were. Daryl Zachary.
He was pretty consistent, athletic, smooth defender. You know, moved as good as anybody in the state, as far as, you know, someone that size.
Al Hamilton.
Same with Al. I mean, he was kind of a George Gervin type player. He was pretty smooth and had a nice finger roll, could get up and jump, and, you know, surprisingly, he grew quite a bit. And I mean, he was very, just a smooth player, and I mean, he was consistent. I mean, you could count on him to give you a great night every night.
Mark Peller.
Peller was very tenacious, hard-nosed, good shooter. Probably the most competitive kid that I played with throughout high school. I mean, he was just hard-nosed, and it definitely carried over to his game of football too.
Dan Grant.
Scrappy and deceivingly quick, real quick hands, good penetrator. Just he was surprisingly turned out to be a pretty smooth basketball player.
Jay Anderson.
Another one, Jay was quick and assertive and had a good mind. He was a good leader, good point guard.
Eric Faber.
Faber was a good. He was a good kid. He was my sister's boyfriend in high school.
I remember.
But no, Faber was tough and scrappy too, and he always wanted to, he'd get in there and mingle with the big dudes, and he was a big dude himself, but he really put forth an effort.
How about the scrawny sophomore, Kevin Lynch?
Yeah, Lynch, he was a stud. I'll never forget when I was sitting up here, and I suppose you must have been in 5th or 6th grade, so I was in 8th grade.
You remember that?
I do, because I was sitting next to 2 hospitality house kids, and they were like, man, that kid, he's going to play in the NBA someday.
Oh, no, no way.
I swear to God, I remember it vividly
that.
to this day. They're like, that dude, he's going to be in the NBA. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of like and I've talked about this many, many times. It was like when Lincoln closed, and then you got this glut of players and who plays. I mean, could Kevin Lynch, should he have started? Absolutely. By being the coach's kid, could have been detrimental to playing time.
I talked to my dad recently about that, and he said he went out of his way to kind of, I don't want to say criticize, but he wanted everybody else on the team to know that I'm going to be hard on this kid too, on his own son. So he did. He would kind of get on me all through high school, but it was probably a good way to do it. No special favors or that type of thing.
Well, when Jefferson, that's one thing I've noticed. Jefferson definitely plays the upperclassman.
Yeah.
Even if maybe a player is not as good, and I still notice they do that. But looking back, and I mean, every time you came in, you were so effective. It was like, how can you not start? And play more. And I mean, you were totally cool with it, and you knew what was lying down the road.
I was just happy. I loved your class.
Yeah.
You guys were all so cool to me. I liked you guys better than the 86 guys that I won a title with. And those are good guys too, but very different feel. You guys were all really cool to me. Plus, let me say this, it was so interesting, like back in those days, sophomores rarely played.
Yeah.
So my sophomore year here at Jefferson was the first time I was in the same building with you guys. You guys you knew I was the coach's kid, but you didn't know really anything about me.
Well, I did, but that's because I knew your brothers and we'd known you for a long time. But yeah, some of those guys.
But that's the first time we played together.
Yeah, for sure.
And nowadays, these got 9th graders, 8th graders playing with seniors.
Well, that's for me, I mean, when I started as a freshman over at Lincoln, and supposedly I was told I was the first one to start in the Lake South as a freshman, and then I came over here, and I might have started a few games, and I got a lot of playing time, but it was tough, I mean, and we had, a lot of players. I mean, that 83 team, we probably should have won state. Definitely could have,
Oh, yeah.
And then 84, we could have won state too. And then 85, we should have probably won, and we didn't. But we were close every time.
Okay, so I'll just, let's go to your senior year, 85. Do you know Jack Evans calls that team the most athletic team he ever coached? On that team, you have a Division I football player, 2 Division I baseball players, Jay Anderson and Jeff Munson, both played baseball at the U. Division I basketball player, and then basically the rest of that team was all Division II or Division III football or basketball players. Almost everybody on that team, including all the juniors that didn't play any basketball or didn't play on the varsity as in '85, almost everybody played a college sport.
Yeah, I mean, when I look back, it's actually amazing, because, I mean, you'd be lucky to get one or two guys off a team now, and that tells you how diversified that team was. I mean, now it's if you play basketball, you probably only play in basketball.
Right.
And, we were playing, I mean, Zach and Al are running track, and, I mean, those guys could have gone D1 in track.
Yeah, that's right.
Peller Peller had a heck of a career at St. John's, and so did Dan Grant. I mean, both those guys came in as freshmen and started at St. John's football, which is pretty unheard of too.
Did they really?
Yeah.
I don't remember that.
Yeah. And then, Jay with his baseball yeah, Munson, I mean, there was a lot of good athletes on that team. And, when I look back at all those guys, one thing though is their parents really were involved in, a lot of those guys' parents were either coaches or, but I used to see them all the time. So there were definitely a lot of people that, worked hard to get them where they're at.
So let's see 84-85 basketball season. Any games during the regular season that stick out to you? I mean, I talked with Daryl the other day about that Hopkins game. Third game of the season, we got kind of hammered. And he was talking about after that game, that was our only loss that entire season until the White Bear Lake game in the state tournament, that you seniors were kind of having it out in the locker room, which I don't remember that.
Yeah, I don't either.
I mean, he was saying he was there, Al was there, you were there, Dan Grant was. Do you remember kind of a confrontation that took place? Because I know Jack talked to us before the next game, which was between the Hopkins loss and we played Armstrong, which was a good team. But then we went on a roll the rest of that season. But
yeah, well, I know coming into that year, I thought we were going to go undefeated and win everything. I mean, I knew there would be some. So when we did lose, I was surprised, and then I didn't think we'd lose again. And if I'm not mistaken, who was the coach at Hopkins? Was that
Hutton.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because I mean, how many times Hutton knew what Jefferson was going to do, though. I mean, of course, I played for Joe Hutton at Lincoln, and that they were brothers. Yeah, I don't recall any incident in the locker room, but Zach's probably got a better memory than I do.
Yeah.
But I was not confrontational about stuff like that anyway.
Okay, so let's get to the state tournament. I know you had 28 against Bemidji in the quarters. You had a big game. And then, do you remember much from that game? What are your memories from playing Bemidji in that quarterfinal game?
I just thought these guys were from northern Minnesota, were very good. I mean, it was must have been.
That was your career high. Must have been your career high.
I think it was. I didn't, I don't even know how many points I averaged, but I probably averaged more rebounds than I did points. But I just remember, once again, we were working it down to the post, and they didn't. I don't think they had anybody that could defend a big guy like that.
Yeah.
And plus we were just way better athletically than those guys.